I've condensed it. I said basically in the beginning that I was raised on the tolerant left. I used to be an ally. So like most, when COVID hit, I ended up chronically online. It was during that time that I finally saw just how deranged the left had become. But there was no way around it. My tolerant left had gone and lost its fucking mind. Trading intolerance chips for totalitarianism, for some shut up, get on your knees and die. Misogyny, that slimy hand around women's throats that I saw as a child, misogyny had had a revamp. It was glamorous now, all sparkly. It had some flags and new allies. Violent beta males wearing hankies on their faces, giving a wink and a nod to their comrades while screaming down women who just don't fancy having girl dicks shoved in their daughters' faces in the change rooms at the pool. Their green-haired 20-something female conspirators feeling righteous while shielding trans-identified men who'd raped little girls and then had their chance with female inmates while imprisoned with them against their will. Freshly anointed trans women athletes mopping the tracks and stalls of the blood, sweat and tears of female athletes who they'd beaten, those tirelessly dedicated women from whom they'd stole. Women were just a feeling. We weren't mothers anymore, we were birthers. I hadn't breastfed for 3 long fucking years. Sore and overtouched breasts, loving but dazed and tired from sleepless nights. I chest fed for inclusion. Our lesbian and gay friends weren't allowed same-sex attraction. Their orientation was just a genital preference for backwards boomers, too vanilla and hate-filled to enjoy someone's vagina without wincing or take that organic strap because it's real and so it's better, ladies. Now suck it. Pedophiles had had a rebrand too. Minor attracted people they were, stunning and brave and here to stay. And if we made a peep about it, we were alt-right fascists. Or the slightly lesser charge, alt-right fascist adjacent, because apparently safeguarding children is violent. Protecting their little bodies is far right. I used to be an ally, but now after having my compassion as a woman weaponized against me, being abused by filthy misogynists and their tragic brainwashed handmaidens, watching our lesbian sisters have to fight again for men to get the fuck out of their bedrooms and social spaces. Reading of countless women and children getting raped and discarded by decrepit autogynephiles wearing woman face like it's our skin, and watching all of those trans folks and trans allies kick back and just deny, denouncing detransitioners like they were the new suppressive persons and thus all but the scum of the earth, yet not a word about the sick and twisted men claiming womanhood who are harming us, representing them in their name, no less. And not a side glance, of course, at all the trans-identified women and girls, forcing nothing, forcing no one save for the muscle and sinew to be cut from their bodies for the sake of simulacrum. It's funny that. I'll politely state for the record it's my preference not to be called a cis woman. I don't qualify my existence in relation to another's, which is especially the case for narcissistic Trojan horses. I will be referred to as a woman, as a female, as a feminist, and not their brand of feminist, but my own. Because women far stronger than us fought long and hard for us to be standing here, and there isn't a misogynist alive who has the chops to change my mind. But they'll call me a TERF regardless, and I'm at the point where I just don't fucking care. Your ad hominems, they're no good here. You can't cash in that guilt by association. Your redirections, projections, smear campaigns, mistruths, and flying monkeys they all alter course and land squarely back on you because reality defines who I am, who we are. I exclude no females from that shared reality, not one. All are welcome here and welcome to return, even those handmaidens, especially the handmaidens, because they won't always be safe from those pitchforks that they're wielding. They're not men, so they're disposable. And if they speak out in turn, then they'll get turned on too. We've been through worse and we've survived because we're women. We're built different. We're observed, not assigned. And nothing enrages a misogynist more than a woman saying no while insisting that she knows her own mind.
Okay, well, let's get into it. Angie Jones, welcome to Balaclava Rising and Cafe Lockdown. I actually didn't I watched the start of that. I didn't see it all. That's pretty powerful stuff. And the only thing I have with it is I just want to play this very quickly because this is a great friend of mine, and I really admire this. This is a trans
Then we got
woman.
on with Moira. I think of Moira the other way, and I've interviewed again on some beach,
Surf beach.
Yeah, and I'd like her to start. Just what you said to me on the phone was profound, and I think it'll set the theme for the show. Is in challenging like a debate. Can you remember what you said?
Was it about defining a woman?
Thank you.
Yes. Do you remember what I said?
Yeah, but I need you to say it. You're the guest.
I will say it. So, in all this debate at the moment, we find ourselves, or women are finding themselves in a position where they seem to have to define who they are. A woman should never have to define who she is. Women and girls have been women and girls since the dawn of time. And as far as I'm concerned, if transgender people / me want to gate crash the party, it's up to us to define who we are, not up to them to define themselves.
I think that's profound. And
absolutely.
so here is where we are. And now I've got another friend, Moira, who's a bit too scared to come on because she doesn't want to get attacked by the trans community, not by women. She's scared of the trans community. And so here's where we are. Angie Jones, you were there. I've got another video of the Nazis that just, what the F is that about? Why were you there? What drew you there? What drew you there first?
Well, isn't it funny that nobody's got any videos of the women's event with the Nazis? Nobody. There was none in the media. Everyone's claiming that we were together and we were in cahoots, but there's no stills footage from the media and there's no film footage from the media. Interesting. Now, we organised that event because Kelly J wanted to come to Australia because she realised how much women in this country have been silenced. Self-ID came in Melbourne before the COVID lockdowns, and it was done by stealth. There was no community consultation. They only consulted with trans organisations. Nobody actually spoke to women. They took a few submissions from feminist groups, but they didn't pay any attention to them. It was a done deal before it had even, they'd even taken it to Parliament. So, so we had self-ID. But then we had COVID lockdown. So the impacts of that weren't really felt in the community. But what happened a couple of years later, once COVID lockdowns were over and we were back into congregating together as women or just in social groups generally, was that we noticed men self-identifying as women and entering our female-only spaces. And we're not talking about the old school transsexuals who were usually gay men, had the full, reassignment surgery and things like that. We're talking about young men who had obviously got their perception of what a woman is through porn over lockdown and came into our spaces looking exactly like pornified versions of men and insisting they were women, and people not understanding the laws around sex self-ID and not knowing that they had any right to exclude them. So women were putting up with, men in our change rooms, men in our domestic violence services, men in our rape crisis centres, places like homeless services are full of biological men at the moment. Mental health units, men are insisting that they are in the female section. I mean, it's like a plague since lockdown has finished, and nobody's allowed to talk about it. There's male rapists in female prisons, and women are being sexually assaulted in prison by biological males, and we know about it, and we go to the media, and the media won't report it. It's been
our media. Well, Can I start? Look, I start. You might find this old-fashioned, right? When I'm 57 years old, when I was in grade 1, we played kiss chasing, and the girls' toilet was Barley's. That was it. You didn't go in. You established really early on that the toilet was a woman's space.
There were boundaries.
What happened from that is as we grew, say me and Leon, we all three went out to a bar. if Leon and I go to a toilet, I'm going to tell you, when men go to the toilet, we don't communicate, we don't socialize, we go, we do, we wash our hands maybe, and we get out. That's it. It's a tool to relieve ourselves. But if the women went to the toilet, Leon and I go, let's go get a drink. They could be a while. We don't know, because that's a woman's space. It's sacred space. And that is being compromised now. And to me, if there's a space now, maybe we have to have a third toilet, which is like, if you want to go and everyone's, I don't know. But the woman's space is a sacred space. And to me,
it's an important
it's
space.
ridiculous. And I've got a young daughter. I don't want my young daughter in a toilet where some pervert comes in. And I'm not saying, like my great mate Sarah and thing, a pervert, they're not perverts. But there are perverts in our community. We have a pedophile problem. We have a sexual thing problem. Most of it is men. We have to protect ourselves away from them. And if you give them an inch, they will take a mile. That's how it works. So that's why they have to remain out. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, third spaces are a good idea, but they won't accept third spaces because they want the validation of being accepted into female spaces. They actually want us to be uncomfortable. Because if they didn't, they'd just say, okay, we'll respect boundaries.
Yeah, I don't think it's all of them. I don't think it's all of them. You know what I mean?
No.
From the trans that I'm speaking to, they're not. They're appalled. They want to be left alone. It's
that's the louder majority, though. It is the younger ones.
Angie, I want to ask you. I didn't get that activist's name that spoke in the introduction that Michael played, and she gave a really powerful speech about her disillusionment with the left, and she felt abandoned by the left. Let me ask you, what happened to the left over the last 2 decades? There seems to have been a change. You might describe yourself as left-wing, but there appears to be some disillusionment there. Could you tell us, perhaps elaborate on that?
Well, for me, myself, I'm working class. I'm from a working class family, and for me, being a leftist was having working class values. Being expecting return for your labor, expecting access to health, education, the basics of a comfortable existence, employment, opportunity, all the traditional working class values. Now, when money came into government, and donations and the amount of money a party had dictated how well they did in the polls, that's when everything changed. Even the unions are now like an arm of the government. Everything is an arm of the government, and all the grassroots support organizations that people have created, either women have created or men have created or trans people have created, in order for these organizations to get funding, they have to do the job of the government. So every single agency has the arms of the government in them, and it is all financial. So, government is now influencing every other area of our lives, and people with money are influencing government policy. Now, the old left wasn't like that. There was a lot more stuff that was publicly owned, whereas now things are privately owned, and the return for investors is more important than providing an affordable product for the consumer, for the working consumer. There's a whole bunch of social and economic factors that have influenced what it means to be an old school left. Now, I don't relate to the postmodern left, where identity is more important than the community, and the family has been sort of ripped into. It's now about empowering individuals within the family rather than a family unit. And I'm not saying a heteronormative family unit. I'm just saying the family unit itself, whether that be grandparents who have no rights at all. It's just a really sort of narcissistic and selfish ideology. you know, and there's a lot of shallow virtue signaling too, whereas Labor used to represent the working class. Now it actually represents its base, which is now the middle class. And it's not because working class people worked really hard and they became the middle class. It's because the middle class couldn't keep up with the wealthy class over to the, you know, and so now they've sort of appropriated the working class as theirs and pretend to have working class values where they don't. They have sort of neoliberal capitalist values. There's nothing working class about Labor at all.
No. Well, one of the ironies now is that the rich vote for Labor and the dirt poor vote for Liberal. That's the truth.
Yeah, that's right.
You know?
Or the minor parties, you know, or parties like, you know, even Pauline Hanson, she is getting the disenfranchised working class voters because the voting system itself it's not really changed, but it's become more complex because people aren't really aware of their choices. Because what happens is nearly, you know, it's all become all about preferences now. So all the minor parties are even at the behest of Labor and Liberal parties and doing their bidding for them almost. So there's no real choice. And people are confused. They're fed up. You know, they donkey vote. Like, people just don't feel heard. And, you know, we're all politically homeless now.
That is actually the big thing. People don't feel heard is the big thing. And that's not just with this debate. That's with all debates. It's with the mandates. It's with everything. Where and most people I talk to now will declare that they don't believe we have a democracy anymore. They think it's gone. Now we're living in a dictatorship, you know.
But we saw this happening. Yeah, I mean, I saw this coming when I was in high school. I'm 53, and you know, high school. Yeah, I am. And in high school, we had, you know, we knew that if we privatized all of, you know, the SEC and all of the schools and the universities, we knew that we would lose, you know, community control of those things, and they'd become private, powerful entities, and they'd get wealthier and wealthier and wealthier at the expense of the consumers. Like, even me as a year 11 kid could understand that. And everything that they said would happen in, like, you know, later capitalism is happening. It's like it's eating itself. They've run out of resources to sell. And they've got to maintain that bottom line. They've got to maintain the return for the investors. And so they're turning to different markets. And then the last frontier is our bodies. And so both with, you know, the big pharma and COVID vaccinations, and also with, you know, dehumanizing women and removing our personal language from our body parts to dehumanize us into being uterus havers, because, you know, it's much nicer to take a baby from a uterus haver than it is from its mother. You know, it's all in together.
The word mother, as far as I'm concerned, is as sacred as the word God, even more so, to be honest. I really believe that is it. I can't get past that. And it staggers me that no one has a problem with it. The prime ministers, like the one in New Zealand the other day, and he's just like, how do you define a woman? And that's why I did this meme today, that I just show it to you, because this was done by him, you know, where you just go, you don't. The actual question is an insult to your mother, and that's my mum, you know, and it really is. And it's not an insult to our mother, it's an insult to our wives, our girlfriends, it's an insult to our daughters. I mean, I'm interviewing, I got a young 12-year-old girl who did an audio recording, a friend of mine, how she was, all the straight kids were basically had to stand in the middle of the class, all the non-binary or all the changing kids on the side. And they ones in the middle had to apologize for how they were bullying the non-binary kids. And this is happening. This is happening now. Yep. It's a Marxism. It's a cultural destroying thing. Now, my thing with when it comes to trans is I've met trans people all my life. You know what I mean? It's been happening all my life, from Danny LaRue up to real people I've worked with who have been transitioned. It must be a difficult thing for them. It's rare, and they have to do what they feel they're called to do. And we live in a free society where if they want to take that journey, No problem at all. You're not hurting my life. You go right ahead. That's the issue now. The issue now is they want transition, but they want the power of this. Because in my daughter's school, she's left now. She came home and told me that she was not allowed to call herself a woman. She had to call herself a cis woman. But if a boy in her class wanted to define himself as a woman, he was allowed to call himself a woman. And if she questioned it, or made a joke of it, she could be suspended. So it forced the girls to be silent. And we saw this with that chubby Asian guy that won the beauty contest, you know, and the girls are like clapping. I'm thinking those girls aren't clapping. Those girls are saying, what the fuck, you know, and it goes the same. The United Nations gave the Woman of the Year or the Most Courageous Woman Award to a man. And then they did in America too. This is disgusting. It's an insult. It's a pure attack on women, which is why you women have the right to fight back. And that's why I tried to get Posie Parker on the show, because I really admire her.
Yeah, and she gave us an opportunity that nobody in Australia would. You know, we knew if she came out here, there would be some media. We never expected the level of media that we got and the nature of it. But we knew that, you know, Kelly J is really good at getting attention, and that she would bring attention to the issues that we have been trying to raise for years and years and years that nobody would give us a platform for. So, yeah, we looked forward to bringing her out. You know, we organised the event. We've got all the permits and permissions. We spoke to the police about our concerns that because the trans rights activists and the anti-fascists were coming, that the far right might attend, because normally if the anti-fascists go out and say, we're going to fight the right actually turn up, because if they don't, the anti-fascists call them cowards. So, you know, the anti-fascists made it clear very early on that they intended to counter-protest our event, but with these false claims that Kelly J was a Nazi, which is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And she has countered those claims and explained these false links time and time and time again, but nobody listens, right? She's denounced Nazis. She's done everything that everyone's saying that she should do now, 100 times. Nobody listened. So, yeah, pardon?
I just have the video to bring up, though. So she's denouncing Nazis. You said Nazis were going to turn up, and then this happens. Let's see if we bring it up. Now the police are leaving them alone. I mean,
it looks like you're getting set up. To me, that looks like it was you getting set up.
Isn't it coincidental that Monica, the new politician, was there, who could be a threat to Daniel Andrews because she's so popular,
Moira,
happens to be there, Moira, and then she gets suspended, almost sacked. But isn't that a coincidence? To me, it's Machiavellian.
I honestly, if I hadn't seen what happened that day with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it. I think that was even more unbelievable than me being on your podcast. You know, if you told me 3 years ago, I'd be here talking to you, I'd say you had rocks in your head, but here I am. But you know what I saw on Saturday, and what I woke up to on the Sunday of that week, like I could never have imagined in my wildest dreams or nightmares. It was. You know, pinch yourself kind of stuff.
Tell us what it was like. Could you talk us through it? Because we saw it on Rukshan's live, and I couldn't believe what I was watching. I was like, what?
His live was one of the more accurate representations I saw. I've seen another, because I've watched a lot of footage because I wanted to understand what happened, because I missed most of it because we were busy concentrating on our own event, which took up a very small corner of the cordoned off area that the police had. So what happened was the trans rights activists tried to kick on with a bit of punch on fairly early on, and they got pushed back over the other side of Spring Street by the police. And the police, were too deep, holding them back from ripping women, mostly middle-aged women, mostly lesbians, gay men, a sprinkle of straight men, and lots and lots and lots of women. They wanted to rip our heads off. They were yelling abuse, swearing, you know, just vile, vile stuff. So cops were about 2 or 3 deep, holding them on the other side of Spring Street. And then there was like a semicircle around us, and there was a couple of other groups there too. So the freedom fighters, who are there, who are on the steps.
Well, they're there every Saturday. Every Saturday.
And they took up the middle of the steps. So we ended up being on on, say, facing Parliament House, we were on the right-hand side. We were set up on the steps, so we were huddled trying to listen to our own speakers facing in towards Parliament House. Behind us, behind our backs, were the trans rights activists on the other side of the road with the police holding them over there. So it was very difficult for us to hear, because one of the tactics the trans rights activists use is to make a lot of noise. So they had loud hailers, they had pots and pans, they had screaming obscenities, they had all that stuff. And so we were concentrating on listening to our event. We had a few invaders too that grabbed the microphone. So, we're very focused on keeping those people out. They'd wear like an adult human female
And
t-shirt.
they were all women.
Yes. And they would wear adult human, or one was potentially trans, I'm not sure. They'd wear adult human female t-shirt in, so we thought they were one of us, and then they'd take it off and grab the microphone, and they're quite stealthy invaders, so we were busy looking out for them. We were under-resourced for marshals because women were afraid to take that role, so we kind of had a handful of women doing the job of 5 women each. It was it would have been nicer to have more marshals. And then we saw a kerfuffle over on the right-hand side. If you're facing from Parliament House, it was on the right-hand side. So the trans rights activists were opposite us, and on the right-hand side there was a bit of a kerfuffle. And it looked like anti-fascists wearing all black running towards the rest of the trans rights activists. So I'm there as as a marshal looking out going, oh my God, Antifa's here, and they're going to smash through the lines and bash us. And I was like, oh, my God, how do I tell Kelly J? Because, at previous Let Women Speak events in the UK, these black-clad anti-fascists had assaulted women. That's their aim, to come in and disrupt. So we were panicking, going, oh, my God. And then the weirdest thing happened. The police let them behind the line. And we're looking, and we could see all these red socialist flags waving around. And then these black-clad men came in behind the line and behind the police cordon. And we're going, oh, holy shit, the cops have let them in to bash us. But the cops were really casual, with their backs to them and acting like they were just, here to deliver milk or something. And so we're going, who the hell is this? And we had no idea. So they were over there talking to the freedom fighters, who were nearly about 20 metres away from us. So they're in between the two groups. And nobody mentions the freedom fighters were there, because all the photos of the TERFs talking to the Nazis are of the people in the freedom fighter group going up going, who the hell are you guys? Because they were just wearing all black. So nobody knew. But we realised that they weren't a physical threat to us, because the police were concentrating on the people who were, which are the trans rights activists and the other group of socialists that have rocked up. Anyway, we're ignoring them. And next thing we know, these blokes walk up onto the steps on the other side of the freedom fighters, and we couldn't see what they were doing really from where we were, huddled in the corner listening to our speakers. And then next thing you know, they unfurl this banner on the steps of Parliament House that says, destroy pedo freaks. And we're like, holy shit, who's this? We thought, we didn't realise. And then they did the old Hitler salute, and we're like, shit. And the reason that we were panicked wasn't because we feared that they were going to bash us, but we didn't want them anywhere near us, because we didn't want to be accused of being with them. We knew how the trans rights activists were going to frame it. So I went up to the police and I said, please, please get them out of here. And the police were casually like, oh, yeah, in a minute, just really acting like they were the most, inconspicuous, harmless people, even more so than the women. It was the weirdest thing. Anyway, the policeman's like, oh, okay, I'll lead them out, and the trans rights activists were by this stage frothing. And I thought that they were going to break through the line a couple of times. They had the police horses in front of them. Some of these trans rights activists were wearing armour and punching the police horses and punching the cops. There were arrests being made because the sight of the Nazis made them go extra rabid. But they weren't actually aiming at the Nazis. They were still aiming their rage towards us, the women. So anyway, the police led these Nazis, neo-Nazis, out, but they didn't lead them out through the big gap between us and the trans rights activists down the middle of the road. They didn't lead them out to the right where there was probably a small gap they could have gone out. They led them right along the police line where the trans rights activists were, which gave them the perfect opportunity to do another Nazi salute right in the face of the trans rights activists. And the police...
Well, let's play that video again, because we've got that video.
Hmm.
Keep talking, but I'll just bring it up. But we've actually got that to just show.
Yeah. The police had their backs to these guys. The police were just wandering around and just so casual around these supposedly dangerous men. And it was, and, you know, I found out later that an article had come out that morning linking the Nazis to a senior police officer in Melbourne, because one of their sons is in that
There you
group.
go. Can you see that?
Yeah. Just
there
so
they are.
casual. Yeah. And cops didn't even care. So
interesting.
Yeah, it was just so bizarre, yeah. And so we're sort of turning around going, what's going on? And the moment they chose to lead the Nazis out was when one of our women was actually whistleblowing that there were actual pedophiles within the Greens. She was talking about it with evidence of pedophiles, active pedophiles, with proof in the Greens. And that's the moment the police chose to lead the Nazis out, so everyone's attention was on these 15 blokes. So yeah, it was just a bizarre experience. And we don't know whether the police let them in as an FU to the anti-fascists that had worked with the Age to get the story out that Nathan Bull was the son of a policeman. We don't know whether Dan Andrews had orchestrated them going behind the line to link them to us. We don't know how they got behind the line, but it was such a bizarre thing. I expected if they turned up that they'd have a big fight in the street with the socialists, and then we wouldn't even see them. They wouldn't be anywhere near us. So the way it all went down, you know, was just bizarre even then. But, you know, eventually our event was called off because when that happened, you know, the anti-fascists and the trans rights activists didn't follow the Nazis and try and fight them. They just got more angry at us women, and we had to finish our event 10 to 15 minutes early because they were trying to break through the line, because they'd got so enraged by seeing the Nazis that it made us want to bash us even more. So
and then the next day, Daniel Andrews flies the trans flag over the Parliament House.
Yeah, you know, we went and had a chat, and, you know, some of it was online about the event, and that we felt that it had been successful. Like, we'd had over 300 people turn up, even though there was probably about 600 trans rights activists and anti-fascists. We were really proud that even though there had been threats of violence, that over 300 people had turned up to listen to women speak. Every single one of our speakers was fantastic. They were on point. They just sounded great. One woman was injured, smashed her head and ended off in hospital when a trans rights activist pushed her to get to the microphone, but nobody was actually bashed by trans rights activists, so that was considered a success. So, you know, I went to sleep late that night thinking, wow, we managed to pull off a successful event in spite of, you know, a few challenges, and Kelly Davis and I was happy. Yeah, and Moira was happy. You know, we thought it was a good event and that it would look great on the live stream and everyone would listen to the women and realise what a problem we had in Melbourne. And then in the morning I woke up and there's Daniel Andrews saying that hate was already at the event before the Nazis turned up, and that we were them. We were the Nazis, and that he couldn't show any images of these people because he didn't want to, you know, give them airtime. The reason he couldn't show any images of these people was because he was lying.
Oh, really? What a shock. He does that?
Yeah.
What a shocker.
Oh, he does.
Really?
And until you're the person he's lying about, you hear and you think, yeah, he's a bit of a prick and he's full of shit. But when it's you that he's talking about, it really makes you, it's really quite undermining to be gaslit by such a powerful man. It's really quite unnerving. You know,
he made a speech. He said that you were targeting the most vulnerable people in society, and he said sarcastically, as if 15 times the self-harm and suicide rate wasn't enough. So when he mentioned that, I immediately thought about the lockdowns and the suicide rates during the lockdowns. And this is a typical narcissist sociopath who just projects his own faults and his own sins onto others. It's a very typical textbook characteristic of a narcissist.
Yeah, the highest rate for suicide in young people is young people with bipolar and young people with schizophrenia. And we have a failed mental health system where if a kid decides that they're trans, they're straight in. But if they've got a significant mental illness like, PTSD or bipolar or schizophrenia, they've got like a 2-year waiting list,
That's actually true. I'm bipolar. And
yeah.
I'm not on anything now, but when I did need to have psychiatric problems when I was young, there was a 6-month waiting list for 45 minutes, and that's all you got for 6 months. So there was nothing. So, but I've managed to cope and get through it, and I use the energy to cope. But can I just bring up something interesting about what's happening as a cultural attack? The cultural attack now seems to be focused on women. And to be honest, for the last 2 decades, there has been a cultural attack on men. We had that Hannah whatever comic come out that they were all raving how great she was. She just wasn't funny. And she actually gets at the end of it and says, white mature males, your time is over. I was in the theatre world, and even though I was surviving as a playwright, we were constantly told they didn't want us. Our time, no one was interested in our stories anymore. So it's interesting that they've done that, because when people are going, where's all the men in the current fights and stuff that we've been having? Where are all the men? And the men do feel that they're under attack and they can't speak. And society needs healthy men as it needs healthy women. And now, instead of that being rectified, they seem to be going, okay, we've done that. Now let's attack women. And they're attacking women. They're attacking girls. The girls can't speak. They've got no power. Everything the feminists fought for has been ripped away. And I see your friend who came from England as a modern suffragette. Here she has been attacked the same way the suffragettes were attacked in her time, and they're attacked even by women, which staggers me. You've got women attacking women, and it's baffling. And yet most women I talk to, like I've been showing that thing of my mum memes around, and on Instagram and Twitter it's going crazy, seem to be on your side. 100% on your side. And we see that with the popularity of that. Is it Moira? The popularity of that. That we seem to be seeing the popularity there. So this is it. And there's not a huge uptake in society I see for these trans rights people of this new trans. And they're different from the transitioned women that I know. This seems to be a pure driven nut job agenda. These images I'm seeing of young girls. I saw one image that I can't get out of my head. Here's a mum standing proudly next to a 14-year-old daughter who has a massive scar across her breast where her boobs have been removed. And I just think, that's just horrific. It's horrific.
And that's happening here in Melbourne. 15-year-olds.
I know.
Yeah, 15-year-olds are having double mastectomies here in Melbourne, and people don't believe it.
Say that again so they can hear it. Just say that again so they can hear it. Say it slow, that's happening here now.
Yes. 15-year-olds are having double mastectomies through the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne now. And they have been for years. I know
without parental consent, right?
With parental consent, they can have them at 15. From 16 onwards, you don't need parental consent for a double mastectomy, and you don't need parental consent for cross-sex hormones, but under 16 you do. And the thing is that parents consent because they're not given another option. They're told that if they don't consent, their child will suicide, and they're also told that if they don't consent, they may lose their child. So it's not like they're going, like they're encouraging it from the first visit. They're not. And now they're fast tracking children into it because the conversion bill has frightened GPs. And instead of GPs, say a kid and their mother comes to a clinic and says, oh, I think I'm trans. In the past, a GP would, offer them psychology or ask questions or whatever. Now they just send them straight to the gender clinic, and the gender clinic is affirmation only. There's, they don't cover any of the other comorbid conditions that may exist, like the fact that they may be homosexual, the fact that they may have autism, the fact they may have a history of trauma or child abuse. None of that is considered. If a kid turns up at a gender clinic and says, I'm trans or I'm non-binary, the physicians just go and run with it. And, within 3 2-hour sessions, that kid's on medication.
Can you just clarify a point? You're saying that they tell the parents that they may lose their child. So could you just elaborate on what that means? Does that mean that the government will actually take the kid away from them?
Yeah, well, particularly in cases where parents are separated and one supports transition and one doesn't. You know, we have a situation, it doesn't matter whether it's the mother or the father that opposes transition, where that parent will lose access to that child. And in a case where a 16-year-old doesn't, you know, both parents don't want them to have medical transition, then that child can be emancipated from their parents by the government. So
in other words, parents don't have consent, only in theory. That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
Well, look, in Canada,
you know,
the law in Canada now is 3-year-olds. If a 3-year-old decides they're in the wrong gender, and if the parents don't support it, the parents can have the child taken away because it's abuse. And there's a man apparently in jail in Canada for refusing to use his daughter's proper pronouns, and he was thrown in jail for 6 months. That's Canada. That's probably coming here. But can I put a theory through to you? When I've talked to people about this, say what can happen. One of the things for young people is attention. If you don't get it, you know, craving attention, and suddenly they're getting online and saying, I might be trans, they do it, and they get attention from their friends. Suddenly their Instagram thing or their Snapchat goes up. But what they've done is they've started a story that they, in order to keep this attention growing, they have to follow the narrative. And now the government, instead of the government and the doctors going, hey, look, you're just a bit confused, relax until you're 18 or 19 thing, the government's now encouraging it. So these people, and I've seen trans people talk about this, they get stuck on this, in this narrative that, and the only way to keep it going is to eventually end up with this mutilation that they're going through, unless they've got somehow find the courage, the strength, or the clarity to stop it. And that is could be a reason why once they've gone through it and once they've transitioned, no one cares anymore because the story's over, that the suicide rate in the ones that have transitioned is so high because suddenly they've ended up in a nightmare situation that they cannot return from. And it's up to us. Because when I talked to Mianna, and I probably shouldn't say her name, but when she transitioned, she had over a year of once a week going in with the psychologist making sure she was making the right decision until after a year, then she could start the journey, which to me makes sense. But this way now of just saying, yeah, you want to start, you want to change, sure, go. I just think it's cruel and insane. You know? And lacks moral fortitude on the adults.
And so I think of some of the stupid things I did when I was in my late teens and early 20s. And I just think, oh, my God, if I'd been, you know, had to make a lifelong commitment to what I was thinking then, you know, didn't even get a tattoo because I knew I'd changed my mind, you know, and I would have been a prime candidate for this cult. I had all the, you know, I just would have been a prime candidate. And, you know, and I think my children are as well. And that's one of the other reasons I feel so passionately about this, you know,
well, look
because,
at tomboys.
yeah, well, that's what I was.
Look at the
Still am.
tomboys.
Yeah, I'm still a tomboy.
There you go. You know, and I was the other way. I was actually quite effeminate growing up. I could have gone the other way where you could have been sitting here with a beard and I could have been sitting here in a dress. You know, that's the reality. You know?
But that's all it takes. You know, all it takes is a slight interest in something of the opposite sex. They go, that's it, you're trans. I mean, it's so ridiculous when you say, oh, how did you know they were trans? They can never give you, you know, they it's something as superficial as, you know, she always played with trucks. And it's like, is that it? Is that it? And really, that is all it is. It's you know, and these kids don't have a healthy concept of what, like you said about, you know, the erasure of the role of men and the role of women. And these children don't have healthy ideas of what it means to be a woman or to be a man. And don't forget that a lot of these kids now have grown up with free, unregulated pornography. So their perception of adulthood is warped by that. You know, there'd be a lot of girls that would be self-identifying out of womanhood because they've seen porn and it's frightened them. And there'd be a lot of boys who, you know, watch far too much porn and have developed really unhealthy attitudes towards women that's warped their brains into thinking that, you know, they're submissive, so therefore they are one, you know. So that things like that, the things that have impacted young people that didn't impact our generation play a huge part in influencing their interest in this gender, whatever. And like you said about status as well, if you're an autistic kid at school, you're lonely, you're bullied, the teachers think you're a jerk, they blame your parents, right? If you're a trans kid, it's a golden ticket to being popular, for your parents being, not blamed for your behavior, gives you an excuse for being a jerk, like the difference in for that one child in how they identify, it's huge. And why wouldn't they? When our kids are struggling, when our kids are struggling in mainstream education that doesn't cater to their needs, and they say, I'm trans, and all of a sudden, they're treated respectfully and differently and all their needs are met. Why wouldn't they do it? And why wouldn't their parents even encourage it? Because when you've got a child that's struggling at school, you're victim blamed by the system, and parents are thinking, oh, well, maybe if my kid was trans, then maybe my child would be acknowledged. That's how crazy it's gotten.
There's even with the young boys, though, it's not just porn. You have all these advertisements where all the men have the six pack and everything like this, that a lot of young boys are going crazy on steroids, trying to achieve what they think they have to look like to be accepted as a man, rather than any deep psychological training on what it actually means to be a bloke. And in fact, it's hard for a lot of men to realize their place in society now because all of that has changed. But we don't have these discussions. We don't have these discussions. Who are we as a society? We don't philosophize at all. And this isn't philosophy. This is madness. This is madness. And the other thing too, my personal belief when it comes to children, as adults, leave them the fuck alone. And I seriously swear to this. Let them develop at their own pace. Let them reach 16 and figure out, oh, I like boys. Oh, I like girls. Oh, I'm not. Let them journey. It's their journey. It's our job to stay the hell out of it because a childhood is so rare and you can't get it back. Let them discover it for themselves, and then they can go into adulthood and do whatever they want because they're adults then. But this thing to push on the kids, it's child abuse as far as I'm concerned.
Another scary thing about these neo-Nazis as well, it was such a great recruitment opportunity for them because you had these deranged trans rights activists with their blue and green hair and their gender, gender cliched sort of hypersexualized outfits and screaming obscenities and acting really, yuck. Just honestly, after standing off with them for 2 hours, I just wanted to go and have a shower with some, disinfectant or something. They were just wild. They were like animals. And then these, completely nuts, but highly disciplined men walked in there and 200 anti-fascists pooped their pants. And that's what the media ran with as an alternative to these anti-fascists and trans rights activists. And if I was a young boy, I may think now that the Nazis represented a more desirable masculinity. Now, they don't understand the ideology.
I've talked to a lot of young men. A lot of young men feel disenfranchised, and they're seeing strength, and the cops protecting them. There they go. They want to. It's. But what I'm really concerned about, to be honest, is I think the women have the ability to fight this if they wanted to. Women could just stand up and say, no, you're not calling me a cis woman. I'm a woman. Literally could do it. They only have to rise up and say unacceptable. But I do feel that there's a lot of people out there who do transition, real people. I've met them all my life in the theater, in other jobs I've worked with. And I fear for them that they will become the object of hate and actually there you go. And they could come under attack. Not my friend Sarah, because she's really well built and, good luck. But honestly, I think they could. And I loved living in a city, Melbourne, where someone who transitioned could get on the tram and no one cared. That was just their journey. They got on. That was it. This is who we were in Melbourne. Be who you wanted to be. But they were adults. Now this thing of driving hate is concerning, very concerning.
See, the trans rights movement, the TQ plus, only got where it is today because it tagged itself onto the back of the LGB, right? So what? And you know, it's not people when the acronym is on purpose that they've thrown everybody in together because nobody wants to be homophobic. Nobody wants to be, you know, transphobic in its true sense. Nobody wants to, you know, be horrible to, you know, someone who is genuinely dysphoric. Nobody does, you know. And so they deliberately attach themselves to this acronym. But what's happened now is the TQ plus is including some of the worst kind of people, like adult babies, men who eroticize infancy, people who eroticize pets, furries, you know, people who engage in age play. They pretend to be children in a sexual way. Like the TQ plus has attracted those kind of people. So there is naturally going to be...
And that's attention.
Yes.
You dress up as a cat and have a kitty litter in your classroom. That's attention. That and victim. Look, unfortunately, I have to go because I've got it. But would you be interested in coming back on and continuing this? Because I think we've got so much to cover. It'd be interesting to see. This will probably get Cafe Locked Out take down because nothing gets you taken down quicker than talking about this subject. So let's see what happens. But would you be interested in coming back on? Also, I wouldn't mind bringing on Sarah to have her point of view in this too, because she's a really powerful speaker, and I think she'd be a really powerful part of this to bring on the trans side. Would you be up for that?
Yeah, of course. I speak to quite a few trans-identified people, so yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, great. Well, I'll see when she wants to do it, but there's okay. Thanks so much. There's
Thank you so much for coming on and at short notice.
That was great. I was enjoying it. I wish I didn't have to go. I could just go on and on and on. There's so I hope you've got over being on this podcast. You said you had trouble, so hopefully you've survived. You know, there's I'm trying to bring up something that doesn't have spelling mistakes to go us out with, and but I really look forward, if we don't get taken down, I really look at having this again, because I think a lot of people now want to talk about this, and if they take us off Facebook, well, we'll just have to have the conversation on Rumble. Thank you for coming on, Angie. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Angie. Nice to have you on.
See ya.
That was fun.
Fathers throughout the land, don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command, and your old road is rapidly fading. So get on the new one if you can't lend a hand. The times they are a change.